We've tried and failed to domesticate certain animals for various reasons. Often these animals are so wary of humans that they flee at the first sight. Others are too aggressive, posing a danger to breeders. Some animals are considered tamed but not domesticated. They can tolerate and sometimes obey humans, but they aren't safe enough to be true domestic animals. These tamed creatures still have wild instincts and can quickly become uncontrollable. In the 19th and 20th centuries, colonists in Africa faced transportation issues because their horses were prone to various diseases, and importing new horses from Europe wasn't easy. They then considered zebras, which are abundant in Africa and immune to many horse diseases. However, domestication attempts failed. Like horses and donkeys, zebras belong to the Equidae family, known as equids. The three species are so closely related that they can interbreed and form hybrids, such as a zedonk, a cross between a male zebra and a female donkey, a zorse, the offspring of a male zebra and a female horse, and a zony, hybrid between zebras and ponies. But unlike their cousins, zebras resisted submitting to humans. Zebras and horses diverged from a common ancestor around 4 to 4.7 million years ago, and each became adapted to their particular environments. Herds of wild horses in North America and Europe were initially kept as food animals, but later became accustomed to humans. After the advent of agriculture 12,000 years ago, horses proved their worth in transportation and warfare, which prompted humans to invest time and effort into domesticating them by selectively breeding the tamest individuals. Zebras are highly alert and aggressive, naturally suspicious of other animals, including humans. They flee at the slightest hint of danger and are fast runners, making them hard to catch. Even when captured, they kick and bite fiercely to escape. Colonists who did manage to catch zebras found them smaller than horses and uncomfortable to ride. Zebras also dislike being ridden and become aggressive over time, even after being tamed. This aggressive behavior is a result of their evolution, as they share their habitat with predators like lions, crocodiles, hyenas, leopards, and humans. Colonists were also concerned that these predators would be drawn to domesticated zebras, adding to the challenges of domestication. People quickly recognized these highly unfriendly qualities, but they nevertheless tried to break the zebra to harness. For instance, in the 19th century, George Grey imported zebras from South Africa to New Zealand, where he was newly appointed governor and was fond of having a carriage pulled by the wild African equids. Victorian-era zoologist Lord Walter Rothschild famously drove a carriage drawn by zebras to Buckingham Palace. Later, in the early 20th century, Rosendo Ribeiro, the first doctor in Nairobi, allegedly made house calls on zebraback. The German army in its German East Africa colony was particularly interested in domesticating zebras in lieu of horses. They even implemented a program to cross zebras with horses to create hybrids that were resistant to diseases that typically wiped out imported horses. However, these were just a couple of instances of tamed individuals. Overall, zebras proved too stubborn to domesticate, despite the best efforts of European colonists in Africa who would have made good use of them. Even recent efforts have proven somewhat futile. Attempts to tame or domesticate great white sharks have consistently failed, with captured sharks often dying within days. The first great white in captivity died within hours, and the longest one has survived in captivity is 16 days. Great white sharks in captivity often hit their heads against the glass walls of aquariums. One shark at Okinawa Chiraumi Aquarium in Japan kept bashing its head against the glass until it died. Another at California's Monterey Bay Aquarium repeatedly hit her head and attacked two other sharks until she was released. Several factors contribute to the poor survival of great white sharks in captivity. They are extensive travelers, capable of crossing entire oceans, and require large amounts of water to breathe. Even the largest aquariums are too small for them. Captured sharks are also extremely aggressive and usually refuse to eat. And when they do, they need live prey, which is hard for aquariums to supply. The dingo, a member of the family Canidae, is native to Australia. Most authorities classify dingoes as a subspecies of the wolf, Canis lupus dingo. though some consider them their own species, Canis dingo. The term dingo also refers to wild dogs found in Malaysia, Thailand, the Philippines, and New Guinea. It appears dingoes were introduced to Southeast Asia, the Philippines, Indonesia, and Australia by sea travelers. The oldest known dingo fossil in Australia dates back about 3,500 years. But DNA studies of living dingoes suggest they may have arrived in Australia between 4,600 and 18,300 years ago. The fact that there are no dingo fossils in Tasmania indicates that dingoes must have arrived after rising waters separated the island from the Australian mainland about 12,000 years ago. Humans, by contrast, have been in Australia for at least 30,000 years. This timeline indicates that dingoes arrived in Australia before dogs were fully domesticated, allowing wild populations to establish. It remains unclear whether dingoes are wild or descended from partially domesticated dogs that later became feral. Despite being an introduced species, dingoes have been in Australia long enough to integrate into the natural ecological system as top-order predators. They are widely believed to have replaced the thylacine in this role, and are often blamed for the thylacine's disappearance from mainland Australia. The domestication process of dingoes differed from that of dogs. While dogs are seen as companions, early native Australians, who likely domesticated dingoes, viewed them as a food source. Additionally, native Australians did not selectively breed dingoes for favorable traits, unlike how dogs were domesticated. A few centuries ago, when horse cavalries were still common, King Carl XI of Sweden wanted a more fearsome animal to replace horses, hoping to scare enemy horses off the battlefield. He chose the moose for this purpose. However, the plan failed. Moose proved too dangerous to approach, especially during mating season when they became uncontrollably aggressive. Additionally, moose are prone to disease and have a varied diet that is hard to maintain. They are also intelligent animals and tended to avoid battlefields. When they did venture close, they fled as soon as another moose was killed. Attempts to use them for meat were also unsuccessful, as moose refused to enter slaughterhouses once they realized others did not return from there. Despite these setbacks, there is still a moose domestication project at the Kostroma elk farm in Russia. This project began in the 1930s when Joseph Stalin attempted to establish a moose cavalry. Like King Carl VII's plan, Stalin's project also failed. Nikita Khrushchev later revived the effort, aiming to domesticate moose for meat. But this too was unsuccessful, leading to the closure of several moose farms. However, the Kostroma elk farm has remained operational and continues its efforts to domesticate moose. Today, the facility primarily focuses on producing moose milk. Raccoons seem like good candidates for domestication due to their skills as climbers and their ability to enter tight spaces, potentially making them useful working animals for seniors and the physically challenged. However, they have not been domesticated and cannot be used in this capacity. Despite their cute appearance, raccoons are aggressive and destructive. They are naturally curious, enjoy moving around, and become destructive when confined. They need constant supervision and can bite when hungry or angry, with bites potentially transmitting rabies to humans. Raccoons can use their hands similarly to humans and often try to open anything they can grasp. They are also adept at escaping, which is a significant reason why domestication efforts have failed. Additionally, raccoons prefer solitude, are not social animals, and do not form loyal bonds with humans. We once fully domesticated foxes. In the northeast of the Iberian Peninsula, between the 3rd and 2nd millennium BC, a widespread funeral practice consisted in burying humans with animals. Scientists have discovered that both foxes and dogs were domesticated, as their diet was similar to that of their owners. These burials reveal a generalized funeral practice that proliferated in the early to Middle Bronze Age, that of burying humans together with domestic animals. Modern attempts to domesticate them have been only partly successful. Ironically, the extinct domesticated fox was called the Fuegian or Yagan dog, derived from wild populations of the Colpeo, also known as the Andean fox. The Fuegian dog wasn't particularly popular at the time, likely because it wasn't as useful as a regular dog. There is also evidence that we tried to domesticate foxes long before the Fuegian dog, but ultimately chose cats instead. Cats were preferred because we couldn't determine a practical use for foxes. Foxes are notoriously difficult to domesticate due to their stubbornness. In the 1950s, Russian geneticist Dmitry Belyaev aimed to change this by starting a project to domesticate silver-black foxes, which are actually red foxes with melanism, a condition that makes them appear black. After 4 generations, the foxes began displaying dog-like behaviors, such as developing a fondness for people, wagging their tails and licking their breeders. After 50 generations, they started barking, responding to humans, and understanding gestures. They also make noises distinct from those of wild foxes. This ongoing project is considered successful in taming the foxes, but they are not fully domesticated. The relationship between Asian elephants and humans has a long, complex, and partially obscure history. It is not known when the first elephant was captured or kept by humans, but it is generally agreed that the earliest known representations of elephants in captivity have been found on seals from the Harappan culture, produced at least 4,000 years ago. These seals were found in Mohenjo-Daro, located in present-day Pakistan, and clearly depict elephants restrained by ropes. Although these are the earliest known representations of elephants kept by humans, it is important to remember that a lack of additional physical evidence does not imply that elephant keeping was confined to one geographical area at that point in time, and may have already been widespread. Some sources claim that humans may have been keeping elephants for the past 8,000 years or longer. Historically, elephants were formidable instruments of war, with references to their use in Sanskrit texts dating back to 1500 BC. Their use in warfare spread from South Asia westward to Persia, and eastward to Southeast Asia. The Persians employed war elephants during the Achaemenid Empire, between the 6th and 4th centuries BC. Southeast Asian states began using war elephants possibly as early as the 5th century BC, continuing until the 20th century. War elephants also appeared in the Mediterranean and North Africa during the Classical period, starting with Ptolemy II in Egypt. The Carthaginian general Hannibal famously led African elephants across the Alps during his conflict with the Romans, reaching the Po Valley in 218 BC. Though the elephants survived the crossing, they succumbed to disease and combat within a year. In battle, elephants were equipped with armor on their heads and sides, and their tusks were sometimes covered with sharpened iron or brass. Their trunks could even have swords tied to them. Trained elephants would use their tusks to attack both humans and horses. They could grab enemy soldiers with their trunks, tossing them to their mahouts or pinning them to the ground and spearing them. Despite their strengths, war elephants had notable drawbacks. Their large size made them highly visible targets, and they lacked the maneuverability of horses. Alexander the Great's soldiers managed to defeat armies with war elephants by injuring the animals' trunks and legs, causing them to panic and become uncontrollable. Despite being captured and trained for over 3,000 years, elephants are not considered domestic animals. Instead, they are classified as tamed or wild. This is because domestication involves selective breeding, where humans choose offspring to breed based on certain favorable traits. For an animal to be domesticated, this selective breeding must continue for up to 12 generations, making them genetically distinct from their wild ancestors. Asian elephants, however, have not undergone such extensive selective breeding. Only a few have been selectively bred past the 2nd generation, which is not enough to consider them domesticated. As a result, they remain wild animals. They allow humans to ride them only because they have been trained, but their inherent wild nature makes them unpredictable. After elephants and rhinoceroses, the hippopotamus is the 3rd largest land mammal and the largest extant land artiodactyl. Despite their resemblance to pigs and other terrestrial even-toed ungulates, hippos' closest living relatives are cetaceans, whales, dolphins, porpoises, from which they diverged about 55 million years ago. Hippos inhabit rivers, lakes, and mangrove swamps. Territorial bulls each oversee a stretch of water and a group of 5 to 30 cows and calves. Mating and birthing both occur in the water. During the day, hippos stay cool by remaining in water or mud, emerging at dusk to graze on grasses. While they rest near each other in the water, grazing is a solitary activity, and hippos typically do not display territorial behavior on land. Cut marks on bones of hippopotamus amphibius found at Bonobo Cave in Spain, a site preserving fossils from 230,000 to 120,000 years ago, provide evidence of Neanderthal butchery of hippos. The earliest evidence of modern human interaction with hippos comes from butchery cut marks on hippo bones found at the Buri Formation, dating back to around 160,000 years ago. Artwork dating 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, depicting hippos being hunted, has been discovered in the Tassili Niger Mountains of the Central Sahara near Janet. The ancient Egyptians recognized the hippo as a formidable inhabitant of the Nile, and tomb representations show they hunted these animals. The hippo was also familiar to the Greeks and Romans. The Greek historian Herodotus described the hippo in the Histories around 440 BC, and the Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder wrote about it in his encyclopedia Naturalis Historia around 77 AD. The Yoruba people referred to the hippo as erinmi, meaning elephant of the water. Hippos are one of nature's most efficient food-weight animals, making them perfect for food. However, humans have wisely avoided attempting to domesticate the hippopotamus, one of the world's deadliest animals. More people are killed by hippos each year than by lions, elephants, leopards, buffalo, and rhinoceroses combined. Any encounter between a human and a hippo is likely to end badly for the human. Hippos have large teeth and can run up to 48 kilometers per hour despite their massive size. To put that in perspective, Usain Bolt, the world's fastest man, can barely reach 45 kilometers per hour. Nevertheless, there have been independent attempts to domesticate hippos, all ending disastrously. In 2011, Marius Els, a South African farmer and army officer, was killed by a 1.2-ton 5-year-old hippo he was trying to domesticate. Els named the hippo Humphrey and treated it like a pet, often taking it swimming and even riding on its back, claiming it was like a son to him. However, Humphrey did not share this sentiment and ultimately killed Els in the same river where they used to swim. Before this tragic incident, Humphrey was already notorious in the local area. He had chased a man and his grandson up a tree after they canoed on the river that ran through Els's farm. Humphrey was also known for killing calves and chasing golfers at a nearby golf course. Bonobos are among humanity's closest relatives. Genetic analysis suggests that the line leading to modern humans and the lineage containing bonobos and chimpanzees diverged between about 6.5 million and 9.3 million years ago. Genetic studies also suggest that bonobos and chimpanzees diverged from each other about 1.7 million years ago. Bonobos are unique among domestic animals because they were not domesticated by humans. They domesticated themselves. Scientists believe this process began about 2 million years ago when the Congo River formed in Africa, separating the ancestors of bonobos from chimpanzees. Approximately 1 and 2 million years ago, the ancestors of modern bonobos and chimpanzees were a single species living in the rainforests of the Congo. This ancestral group inhabited areas north of the Congo River, which prevented them from moving south due to its width and treacherous nature. The Congo River, known for being the deepest river in the world, acted as a significant barrier. Around that time, sediment analyses indicate that the river's flow dropped significantly. The waters of the Congo receded from the banks, making the river shallower and less formidable. This brief geological moment allowed the ancestors of bonobos to cross to the south. Shortly after this hypothesized crossing, the Congo River's banks flooded again, permanently separating the bonobo ancestors from their relatives to the north. North of the river, competition for resources made life challenging. The ancestors of chimpanzees had to contend with other groups of their kind, as well as ancestral gorillas, for both food and territory. This intense competition led them to evolve a tougher disposition to defend themselves against intruders and protect their land and group members. Because violence and fighting skills improved their chances of survival, chimpanzees evolved aggressive tendencies. Simply put, the tough chimp survived long enough to reproduce, passing on their aggressive traits to their offspring. Today, modern chimpanzees exhibit behaviors such as attacking group members, raping females, killing infants, and murdering other adult chimps. In contrast, the apes that crossed south of the river found a more favorable environment. There were no ancestral gorillas and few other species to compete with. Food was plentiful, and there was ample uninhabited territory. Without the need for aggression, these apes began to share resources. Friendship and cooperation became essential for survival. Females with the most friends had the best chances of survival because they could band together to prevent bigger males from bullying them. This social network allowed females to gain the upper hand, eventually becoming the dominant sex. With abundant food and little reason for conflict, the migrant apes thrived in their new territory. Over time, their bodies became more slender and less stocky than their chimp cousins. They learned to cooperate and be tolerant of strangers. Remarkably, their neurobiology, the structure and function of their brains and their chemical makeup, began to change as well. Coyote, Canis latrans, New World member of the dog family, Canidae, that is smaller and more lightly built than the wolf, Canis lupus. The coyote, whose name is derived from the Aztec coyotl, is found from Alaska southward into Central America, but especially on the Great Plains. Historically, the eastern border of its range was the Appalachians, but the coyote has expanded its range and now can be found throughout the United States and Canada. Unlike wolves, who roam around in packs, coyotes roam around in solitude or in monogamous pairs or as a family with their pups. The reason this happened evolutionary-wise is because unlike wolves who need their large packs to hunt down a large prey as a group, coyotes hunt for rats and other small animals. They do not need a pack for this, hence their solitary existence. Coyotes form families and the couple normally takes care of raising the pups. Keeping a single coyote at home would be extremely cruel, as these animals need to form families. Dogs, unlike coyotes, accept their humans as wolf pack leaders and normally do not form families, and the males are normally not involved in nurturing and feeding the young, unlike coyotes. All attempts to domesticate the coyote have failed because they naturally avoid humans. Human breeders are also cautious due to the risk of dangerous diseases like rabies and tularemia. Despite these risks, some breeders have tried to domesticate coyotes. One common method is to crossbreed a male coyote with a female dog. While the resulting hybrid is less aggressive toward humans, it is not a true coyote. Another approach is to take young wild coyotes from their mothers and train them into adulthood. Wild coyotes become less wary of humans after about 3 generations, but they are not truly domesticated animals. In fact, several attempts to domesticate a coyote have ended with the coyote attacking the breeder. This aggression occurs because a coyote close to humans might start seeing humans as prey and look for the right moment to attack. Interestingly, coyotes are slowly becoming domesticated in a natural process, similar to how bonobos did.